Heyo, busy brain. Welcome to the Busy Brained Saint podcast, where faith meets focus. I'm Camden Hainsworth, an expert ADHD coach, here to help you understand your mind with confidence. God knows your brain perfectly, so let's explore that divine design together and discover just how fulfilling your life can be, living with God and ADHD. Hey ADHDer, I'm so grateful that you have chosen this podcast today. Thanks for being here. You've probably had these moments in your life where the same ADHD situation continuously creeps up. And no matter how many different angles you go about trying to conquer this symptom or this struggle, it just seems to be failure time and time again. Sometimes what you just need is a second view, a different view, a non-biased view. There's a really common phrase in the coaching world that says you can't see the outside of the label from inside of the bottle. And that's precisely what ADHD coaching does, is it allows me, as somebody who understands the ADHD brain, who's really got an attuned ear to help people, I can listen to your situation, listen to your struggle, and hear it in a different way. And I'd love to be able to do that for you. I have 20-minute free coaching sessions. I call them my mini sessions. And if you don't know if a whole coaching package is exactly what you want to sign up for, or if you are interested in learning more about my coaching, these free mini sessions are there for you. So highly recommend CamdenADHDcoaching.com, and you'll click on mini session, and then we can get together. And just in that 20 minutes or so, I promise I'm going to send you a whole different perspective on how to approach this. I know that I've at least helped you in some way to get a hold of yourself with ADHD. So once again, CamdenADHDcoaching.com, click on free mini session, and I hope to see you very, very soon. Now into the podcast. Hello, you made it. I'm so happy that you are here. My brain is busy and my heart is full. Today's podcast episode is titled The Discipline of Constraint, ADHD Edition. So many times we are ping pong balling, as I call it, all over our life. And when someone around us might say, just choose one thing and do it all the way, we roll our eyes, because with ADHD, that doesn't actually feel like an option. And it can be really frustrating when people talk about this idea of narrowing down and choosing one thing and starting at the beginning and ending at the end of one idea in this linear fashion. And they talk about it like it's easy, and yet is the hardest thing ever. And a lot of the time when I'm working with my clientele, this is what happens. They start to name call. This is so stupid. I can't believe I can't do this. It's so simple. I just need to do X, Y, or Z. I just need to send the email or write the invoice or get back to the person on text. I know I can do it. And yet we don't. And as soon as we can start to say it's difficult for the ADHD brain to do this, then we're going to start to speak more truthfully to ourselves. So what is it about constraint? You know that I've talked about with you this idea that we operate with a mind that does not just sing one melody. It has so much more score of music. There's harmonies and dissonance and time signatures and all different kinds of notes. And they're all super important to us in this music. And most of the time, we can't even hear what the melody is. See, someone without ADHD, they can hear all of that music, but they can hear the main melody. And that is because their brain regulates well. And I'm not saying we can't hear the melody of music. We can. But in our own mind, from inside of our own life, to pick out the melody is to pick out the most important or the most prioritized parts of this music that is just playing constantly in our mind. And so when other people say, just sing the melody, just do the one thing all the way through, it's infuriating. It feels really difficult. So you're not alone in that. When we're just looking at a piece of music and we see all of these notes on top of each other, and we feel like they're all important, they're all essential, and should all be prioritized with equal weight, and then we're asked to just choose one, how are we supposed to choose? And what I have found over time is this magical word called constraint. Now imagine with me that you are in a bowling alley and there's lots of lanes with bowling balls and people playing, and the pins are all up. But instead of each individual lane being separated by the two gutters, it's one big wood floor, okay? And there's no gutters, but there are pins set up, and the game is exactly the same. And we're looking at, 10 to 15 different lanes, but they're not really lanes. 10 to 15 sets of pins set up at the end of this big room, and we're holding one bowling ball. That is essentially what we're trying to figure out, is like, where do I throw this ball? What's going to be the most effective? And so a lot of the time what we start doing is we just start throwing these bowling balls onto this floor. I'm losing the word. Wood, planked floor. No, what is it called? When you have a nice hardwood floor. There you go. Hardwood floors. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. And we just start throwing this bowling ball at wherever in the room, hoping that it will knock down a couple of pins. Now, if you, like me, grew up and landed on ESPN every so often when they were doing the bowling championships, they were pretty cool to watch, right? But they were laser focused on the set of pins in front of them. And what made that super clear is that there were gutters on either side of the lane, the alley, whatever you call it. But when those bumpers are taken away, which is essentially what our brain is like, all of a sudden it seems like we have more options, and it seems like we should be able to knock all of them down at the same time. But that's not always the case, right? And even if we try and do that, the effectiveness of actually getting the pins down decreases dramatically. What is still going to be the most efficient is going to focus ourselves with the one bowling ball in our hands and the pins right in front of us, and to systematically constrain to those, even though all the others are available to us, and to roll that bowling ball, throw it down, straight line toward that front center pin, and hope that we get a strike. And then we either pursue until we get a strike, or we go to the next set and we take another bowling ball and we throw it down, even though the bumpers aren't there. We constrain to those pins right in front of us, and we throw that bowling ball down the alley. If that was the whole point of playing bowling, of doing bowling, we would take it a set at a time. But our ADHD brain says, no way, there's got to be a more efficient way. And let's pretend like each one of those sets of bowling pins were still protected. We couldn't start on the far end and in a perpendicular way hit them all down coming the other way. But our brain wants to see an easier way. It tells us, no, that takes too long. That's too boring. It's going to take too much energy. But it's so interesting, because what if this bowling alley was only one lane? What would your ADHD brain say then? It would say, oh, look at this challenge. Okay, one lane, set of pins in front of me. Let's see what we can do with this bowling ball. All of a sudden, it would be so exciting to try and knock down these pins. But because our brain does not have that kind of natural constraint, and it can see many tasks at once, it starts to get overwhelmed. And it tells us that taking the necessary steps and focusing in on just one set of pins is inefficient, that it's tedious, that it's boring, that it's frustrating, that it's anything less desirable. You know what sounds more desirable? Chaos. Because at least in chaos, there's novelty, and we never know what might happen. There's surprise. There's this feeling of what if, less predictability, And there's something that our ADHD brain really likes about that kind of an adventure. Most of the time, however, in our life, we're less concerned about the adventure when we're trying to pay bills or send invoices or answer emails or fill out, gosh darn, doctor information or whatever it might be. We're less concerned about the adventure in that. What we just want to get done is the task. We want to complete it. But our ADHD brain doesn't understand that. Remember when we've talked about this motivational triad in our brain that's essentially the megaphone of our limbic brain? And it talks about three things. It talks about conserving energy, so doing things efficiently. It talks about avoiding pain, which when we have to constrain down to that one bowling alley and that one set of pins, feels painful, it feels tedious, right? So it's all about avoiding pain. And then it's about seeking pleasure. And that's what I'm talking about. It feels more fun to want to throw those bowling balls all over this hardwood floor that doesn't have any gutters and see what might happen. But the limbic brain, remember, is only there to help support us with survival. It's an ancient operating system. It's something that was there to help societies in caveman days so they didn't die. We are less concerned about dying when we're doing our taxes or doing our homework or paying our bills. That's not a life and death type of thing. And yet the consequences of not doing those things are going to make our lights shut off and are going to get us in trouble with the IRS and are going to not really plead our case very well for trustworthiness, right? So our brain is giving us a message that we should just throw the bowling balls all over the place, ping pong ball, not constrain, not try and just focus on one thing in front of us because it's afraid that's going to be too painful. And it offers us that there might be a more fun way and even a more efficient way, but it's lying. Yes. And this is a hard part of understanding this is you're telling me that my brain is lying to me. Yeah, I am. And the sooner you can pick up on the most common lies that your ADHD brain tells you, the sooner you're going to start to see where your choice actually is. Because right now you think you have to knock down all the pins in a chaotic way. That's what you think you have to do. And yet we know time and time again that's not what gets us the outcome that we want the most. We know that what we actually need is for tasks to be accomplished. And so consider that, okay? Now, a non-ADHD brain will be in the same bowling alley, but they can see that there are actually gutters with each set of bowling pins. And so when they get their perfectly weighted bowling ball for them, they look, they don't even consider throwing the bowling ball from the far left side of the center, the place that they're at, to try and hit the pins on the far right. They would never consider that because then they'd have to go through all of these gutters all the way across. So they very naturally see, why are you trying to do that? Can't you see that there's gutters here? Just throw it down the lane. That's going to be a lot more efficient. It's going to get you what needs to be done. And it seems pretty clear of what we need to do. But they don't understand that we don't see the gutters. And maybe even for us, the gutters aren't even there. So when I talk about becoming a tour guide of your own brain, a VIP tour guide of your own brain, it's essentially to see that you just see hardwood floors all the way across with no gutters, and multiple sets of pins on the other side, and they're protected on the horizontal way, right? So you can't get them. You have to come at them from the front. And the VIP tour guide says, oh my goodness, this is looking jumbled. We need to put up some bumpers. We need to put up, if there's no gutters that we can see, we need to either highlight them or figure this out. And so when we become the tour guide of our own brain, we, number one, notice that. And then number two, we do something about it. And so imagine with me that this tour guide hops into this bowling alley with hardwood floors and no gutters. And she's, okay, what can we do here? Maybe she's going to put lights down. She's going to put LED lights to create a lane and say, okay, this is where we're going to start. Once we knock down these pins, now we're going to bring these lights. We're going to move them over to the second lane and we're going to bring these down here. Okay. Maybe it's lights that helps us constrain. Maybe she's going to get some pool noodles and some duct tape and she's going to put those down so that those pool noodles line where the starting point is. Maybe she's just going to stand right behind us and just keep us constrained. One thing at a time. I want you just to focus on the pins, these ones right in front of you. And she's going to be more of this conscience, keeping us focused. Okay. There's many different things that this tour guide might be able to do to help us constrain. And it is hard. Isn't that a weird feeling to throw that ball down knowing that it's this entire hardwood floor instead of with those gutters? Those scenarios feel very different to me. And we need to be honest about why that feels hard for ourselves. And when we're honest about it, then we don't fight it as much. We say, yeah, this is hard for me. It makes sense that this is hard for me. Another thing that I can do is I distract all my other little squirrels, right? We've talked about this before too. And so I will put ASMR or I'll put instrumental music that I don't know very well, so I can't sing to, in my ears to distract the parts of me that want to look at all the other sets of pins. I don't even know if they're called sets, but they want to look all the way across and say, oh, look at all those other pins. Maybe I could hit those. But I give them some music to listen to so that they don't notice those other sets of pins and I can just laser focus on the thing right in front of me. Constraint. That's what we're talking about. Constraint. And so when you find yourself, number one, with a long list of things that need to get done, and you are just walking all over the house from one thing to the next, never actually doing anything except for making yourself more exhausted and more concerned and more worried. Number one, have you externalized your mind? Have you written down? That was weird. Have you written down? English is sounding very strange. All of the tasks that you need. Okay, we have to externalize them because keeping them in our mind is only going to drive us crazy. It's just not an effective way. So we write them down and then we prioritize based upon capacity. And you can go back and listen to my podcast about capacity-o-meter. Okay, but we prioritize about how much capacity it's going to take from us, not necessarily the time or how long it is or how involved it is, but how much it's going to take from us. And then after we look at that, we decide, okay, which bowling alley lane am I going to start on? And we constrain and constrain. And when something else pops up that says, oh shoot, I don't want to forget this, we put it on the list. See, our natural tendency is to then ping pong ball over to that other task that just came into our brain. Why is that? Because we don't want to forget it. And then because it's important. And it's novel and new. Sticking and constraining to one thing can start to feel quite monotonous, but you also know the feeling that comes when we are able to hone in and give our attention to that, and then we can check it off. Oh, that accomplished feeling is so awesome that we don't have to be concerned about it, or we don't have to keep remembering it over and over again, keeping it in our working memory constantly. That's exhausting. So our limbic brain is telling us the lie that we have to switch over and do this thing that just popped into our head right there in the moment, because number one, if we don't do it now, we're going to forget. And number two, it's something new and novel. And that's a lot more fun. Remember, seek pleasure. It's a lot more fun than continuing on with the same old task. But it's a lie. Because if we were really focused on the consequences and the results of what we were doing, the ping pong ball effect leaves us only temporarily and momentarily entertained, and in the end leaves us feeling exhausted and defeated, because we very rarely are able to accomplish everything that we want. This conversation is not the same as for me at least, as being a mom of 4 kids, running a business, being a soccer coach, involved in my ward and my church, to me, it's not the same thing as, okay, I'm going to start cleaning my bedside table and my daughter is crying, so she needs a sandwich. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that and come make her a sandwich. And while she's eating, because she eats better, while I'm in the room, I'm going to also load the dishwasher, and then I'm going to come back and finish my bedside table. To me, that is the life of a mother. And that is just normal. Okay, so constraint doesn't mean that we're being unrealistic. Please hear me with that. But could you also notice the constraint in that situation? The constraint was I was only willing to pivot when a truly more prioritized need came up. My daughter being hungry, who's 4 years old and can't do this herself. And still the constraint was there because what did I do? Even though I did the dishes and used my time wisely and effectively, I was doing that to support her in her eating process. But the constraint was still, I'm going to go back. I haven't forgotten about it. Okay. Sometimes I'll actually leave music on in that bedroom to help me remember that's what I was doing. Or I'll set an alarm for 15 minutes to help me remember to get back to that, because oftentimes I won't. And even if you don't, it's not a moral failing, but do you choose it? That's the bigger question. Maybe you go in there, you get her lunch, and you're doing the dishes, and you realize you are just super exhausted. And you have the choice. Am I going to sit down for a while, take a nap, or am I going to go back and finish this? When you can start to see that's a choice, not just a passive in the moment impulse, okay, to do something different and to not remember, when you can start to see the choice, then you are intentionally procrastinating. You're intentionally putting that off. And you're allowed to do that because you're the boss of your life. It's when the ADHD makes everything feel forgetful and undone and unattainable. That's when we start to feel like we aren't in control of our own life. And so much of my work as an ADHD coach with my clients, hopefully here on this podcast, is to help you see that even with ADHD symptoms, those aren't always going to go away. They might improve here and there when we get our hormones balanced, when we're on effective medication, when we get enough sleep, etc. They can improve, but to think that they're going to completely disappear is not helpful. What we need to know is that those symptoms are going to be present, but we can be more than the symptoms. We can then step aside as that tour guide that sees the bowling alley for what it is with no gutters and says, how can we make this easier? What other choices do we have here than just throwing the bowling balls all over the place? What can we do now? That is really difficult. I'm asking you to do a big thing, but I'm not asking you to do an impossible thing. I will tell you that if your nervous system is so completely on fire, if it is so in fight and flight that you can't constrain, you feel like you're going to die if you constrain, or your anxiety goes completely up, please seek help for that. Go to a therapist. Consider EMDR or ART therapy. Maybe get a meditation coach or someone who's going to help you, or an EFT coach that's going to help you learn more about tapping and about regulating your nervous system. There are many different ways and mechanisms to do that. Hypnotherapy is another one. For me, I think being honest about my trauma, being honest about why my triggers exist, and then having years of therapy, of talking to people, of figuring out why I am the way I am and what messages I internalized, whether or not they were intended to be internalized, right? It's no one's fault. It's just, it helps me see, oh, My body is afraid of only doing one thing because it thinks that it's going to be less of a human if it doesn't accomplish all the things. And so I can nurture that part of myself who's trying to figure out that wound, who's trying to get in touch with themselves better. And I can tell her the truth of, it doesn't matter how many things you get done today, you have eternal worth. And so let's just be curious. Let's just do an experiment and see what might happen if we do constrain down to one or two things right now. And we see those all the way through. And it's going to be crunchy and it's going to be uncomfortable and you're going to want to seek pleasure and you're going to want to avoid this pain. But let's just be curious about it and see what might happen. And remember, you're safe the whole time. This is the nurturing that I'm telling myself. And when I do that, I gain evidence. My brain gains evidence. My body starts to realize that it actually is safe, that it doesn't have to do everything all at once. And in fact, that is going to make me less effective as a person than doing a couple things at once. And I say a couple things because I'm a mom. But I will say this often to myself. I'm like, Camden, what are you doing? What are we doing here? Okay, we are answering an email because I still have ADHD. Just before I hopped on this podcast, same thing. It's like I'm calendaring and I have an email to answer and I'm trying to coordinate through my text messages with clients and I'm trying to get the schedule ready for this fall when school starts. And I want to scroll on TikTok and I want to listen to the Marco Polos from my best friends. And I just say, wow, what are we doing here? What is the most needful? And now we're on a podcast, 26 minutes in. It's not that the ADHD symptoms don't come up. It's not that we all of a sudden get gutters in our large bowling center. It's not that all of a sudden this becomes easy. It's more that we recognize why it's hard, and then we can see how we can step in to compassionately help ourselves learn to constrain. Constraining the brain is a skill. And it's a skill that many neurotypicals don't even have to practice because their wiring and their programming is already set up that way. They already have the gutters, right? So as we're practicing this, it's going to feel hard. And that's how you know that you're doing it right. I just met with a client yesterday, and I loved that they just started laughing. They said, and I've been working with them for almost 5 months now. And they said, I cannot believe that I once believed I didn't have ADHD. This is wild. Because all I'm doing is showing him his life and showing him his behavioral patterns and showing him why things are the way they are. That's all I'm doing. But for them, hearing that and seeing that and now finally accepting it is like, I think it's the step right before the success. Because before they would see it, and I think it was still more of like this personality thing or it's just the way that I flow and the way that I vibe. But now that it's clicking differently, they're able to see the whole world has been bowling with gutters and specific lanes. And I've just had one big lane with 15 sets of pins my whole life. It's no wonder this is so confusing. It's no wonder I don't know what to do with this bowling ball most days. So to bring them to that lane, to set up those lights or those pool noodles or whatever it might be, to say this is where we begin. That's when we begin to say ADHD is no longer going to have a hold on me. I see where it wants me to go, and I choose to do something different because I know that the result of the doing something different is so much closer to the type of person that I want to be and has get me so much closer to the life satisfaction I want to have. And it's going to help me realize the goals that I have in my life far more than the instantaneous small dopamine hits of just throwing this bowling ball whatever way. In closing, I just want to highlight that I really feel like there is a massive difference in my adult clients who are learning this skill and principle compared to my teenage clients. Maybe if you can think back to when you were a teenager or even in your early 20s, and you could feel like, compared to how my brain feels now and how I'm settled now, my teenage brain had not grown. It was not all the way mature yet. And so this metacognition that we're talking about here, I think therapy, they talk about this idea as wise mind. And don't quote me on that, but this idea to be able to view your thoughts, to think about your thoughts, to see your thinking patterns and what your brain is providing you, like what it's offering you, and say, I'm not going to do that. That is not going to help me. That, I feel like that is more effective the older we get, but maybe not too old. Though I have had more mature clients and they come to me really willing to learn. But so be kind to your teenage kids, because this whole idea is they're just trying to figure out who they are in general, let alone think about their thoughts, right? So this differentiation, I'm not saying it's impossible. And I do, when I'm coaching, I coach and I teach a little bit differently for them, but the same ideas. Give a little grace, because if it's this hard for us with fully developed brains, I just can't even imagine my own mind trying to have this kind of metacognition. It really would have helped me, but that's also to think that I had the same brain that I have now back then. So I think we just need to be patient. And many of our ADHD kids too are 2 to 3 years, even 4 years behind emotionally a lot of the time. So catching up might take them into their late 20s and 30s. And then we have to ask if they're going to be willing to learn and be open to this too. So just hang in there. Remember that we each have our own journey, that we each are here on earth to accomplish our life. My life is not to accomplish the life of my children, even though I want to so bad. My job as a mom, or at least the philosophy I take, is to give them opportunities and guardrails and scaffolding and support that they would then have to grab onto. But I like to try and make it as abundant as possible so that even if I think I have A+, B-, C options for them, that they might not choose my A+ option, but the C option in my perspective will be good enough for them, and it might even be better. So constrain that brain. Constraint is a really beautiful word when we start to see how it pushes us toward the life we really want to live, and why it's so hard to do in the first place. Please know how much I love you, and I'm always cheering you on. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Busy Brained Saint podcast. If you're eager to explore the world of ADHD coaching, make sure to connect with me on Instagram at Camden_ADHD, or visit my website, CamdenADHDcoaching.com. For more LDS-specific ADHD content, don't forget to follow this podcast and join us on Instagram at The Busy Brained Saint. Listen, I'm here to support you on your journey. I cannot wait to have you as a part of our community. Stay engaged, stay inspired, and remember, you're not alone here. Thanks for being a part of the Busy Brained Saint family.